to all of you, and that you'll be able to use this as guidance in moving forward with your transition. We're going to kind of go over the just to let you know, everyone is on mute. However, if you do have questions, we will encourage you to use the question section of the dashboard. We will definitely make time for as many questions as possible at the conclusion of the presentation. We've had a lot of great questions in past webinars, and I definitely want to be sure that we answer any and all concerns that you folks might have. Let's go over today's topics. We're going to start with a discussion on where the standards come from. We're going to review why these things are changing. Again, those of you that have been certified for a long time have probably gone through at least one, if not two, of these transitions. We're going to go over the timeline and highlight where we have been and where we're going. We're going to take kind of an in-depth look at the key changes. We're going to answer what is probably a very crucial question for a lot of you. Do you need to overhaul your current system? And then, as mentioned, we will definitely have time for any questions that folks may have. So let's begin with, where do the standards come from? The standards that we use, if it's an ISO standard, that means it's a publication of the International Organization for Standardization. Now, who they are is a collective. They're made up of numerous international members. Now, each one of their standards is assigned to a technical committee, or TC. TC 176 is the technical committee that's assigned specifically to ISO 9001. And it includes members from each of the major industrialized nations. Now, here in the United States, our representatives come from the American National Standards Institute, or ANSI. In terms of why the standards are changing, there's a lot of reasons why these standards are changing and what they're hoping to accomplish with this revision. First of all, in a broad sense, the ISO recognizes that the needs of the industries that use ISO have evolved. They're going to continue to evolve based on the changing needs and the industries that ISO is used in. So ISO very much wants the 9001 standard to keep up with the times, so to speak. They want to see ISO 9001 be adopted into more sectors, to be used in more industries. They see a great potential for ISO 9001 as big as it is now, that it could continue to grow. There's been a targeted effort on this go-round to simplify the language and to make sure that things are consistent, and both in terms of how it's interpreted at the auditee level and to a great extent how it's interpreted by auditors and certification bodies. And a really big goal on this particular go-round was the desire to improve the cross-compatibility between the standards. Some of you on our webinar today, you may already be both ISO 9001 and ISO 14001. And in the past and right now, companies that have more than one certification often are faced with the prospect of having multiple manuals and multiple procedures. And the ISO recognizes that that's complicated for a lot of companies, big or small, to maintain multiple systems. And so what they've tried to do on this particular go-round is to provide a framework that can allow for some harmony between these standards, so that an organization could conceivably achieve ISO 9000 and ISO 14001 with a single set of documents, if that was what they wanted to do to facilitate that process. Let's take a look at the timeline. We're kind of at the midway point. I would say we're getting to the end of the midway point here in terms of the critical points in this process. We're going to begin with where we are coming from. In June of 2013, we saw what was called the committee draft get issued. This was a first draft, a chance for the higher level TC 176 committee members to kind of weigh in and issue their best guess on how the new standard should look. That in turn became what we call the Draft International Standard, or DIS, and that was issued in May of 2014. And that's the stage that we are at right now. We are nearing the end of the DIS phase. Now going forward, these are all projections in terms of hitting these dates. We're expecting to see what is called the FDIS, or Final Draft International Standard, in July. Now that document should very, very closely resemble the final standard, and the final standard is being projected for September of 2015. So those two documents should be very, very similar. I would say in terms of purchasing one or the other, you certainly have the right to purchase the FDIS or the DIS that's out right now, but it's probably not going to be beneficial to you to purchase either of those. I would encourage you to wait until the actual 9001 2015 standard is published in the fall and purchase that document. Then looking way into the future, in September of 2018, all ISO 9001-2008 clients will need to have successfully transitioned to the new standard, because at that time the ISO 9001-2008 standard will cease to be a viable standard. That is the only time frame that we have been able to confirm up to this point, that when the standard is published 36 months or 3 years later, the ISO 9001-2008 standard will cease to exist. Now, a couple of things to keep in mind here with regards to the timeline. The September 2015 publication date for the final standard it's probable, it's likely, but it's not definite. There are a number of things that could come up between now and then that could push back the publication date. Issues being raised by members of TC 176, certain concerns that might be raised by parts of industry. These things, I would say, are unlikely to push back the publication date, but they could happen. Now, the transition timeline, of course, does not take hold until the standard is actually published. So, for example, if the standard is published in October of 2015, that would mean that ISO 9001-2008 would be cut off in October of 2018, and so forth. Now, in terms of additional audit time, for several of you, this is obviously going to be a concern. How are we going to handle the transition process? As of right now, we do not know if it's going to be necessary to add additional audit time for the transition audit. Now, those of you that are already certified and have been for some time, you will know that on a recertification audit, there's already additional audit time. Our projection is that it would be ideal for a company to complete their transition as part of the recertification audit. Now, of course, that's not mandatory. That's for you to decide, but that would be the most ideal scenario. Now, the September 2018 cutoff, what that's going to mean for registrars like PJR, we are internally at some point going to have to decide a cutoff date for companies to perform a transition audit. Now, obviously that's going to vary from case to case, but to give you an example, let's say that you put off your transition for as long as you possibly can for one reason or another. We would likely then say to you, okay, you have to complete your transition audit no later than, say, July 1st. And the reason we pick July 1st is because we need to allow an appropriate amount of time for review of corrective actions, for approval of the audit report that the auditor prepares, and so forth, so that we can assure that you will not have a lapse in your certification. Now, at this point, that decision has not been made as to when that cutoff is going to be. But I would plan internally that it's likely going to be sometime in mid-summer of 2018, depending on when the publication date is. Obviously, that's very critical information, and it's information that we would share well in advance of the cutoff date. Let's talk a little bit about the key changes. ISO 2015 is going to be among the very first of the ISO standards to make use of the standardized structure represented by what's called Annex SL. Now, Annex SL is a part of a larger document, the ISO IEC Directives Part 1, Consolidated ISO Supplement, procedure specific to ISO. You can think of that document as kind of a larger rules for engagement on writing management system standards. It's their own internal procedure on how to write a standard. You can think of it that way. And Annex SL is really only a portion of it. Now, Annex SL and the Directive Part 1 can be viewed. I've provided the web link here, and if you want to download the slides after this presentation is complete, you can definitely visit the ISO website and view the annex yourself. It's also been called the high-level outline, Annex XL. There's a couple of names that have been applied to it. It was first written back in 2012, and it was the output of a special committee that was appointed. And what this committee was tasked with was come up with a blueprint that every single ISO standard can be written around. And what Annex SL is, it's a 10-section skeleton that promotes a number of things. Common terms, core definitions, making sure that ISO 9001 and ISO 14001 and ISO 50001, that each of these standards has a similar look, and where you have common terms, for example, organization. That's a term that's used in numerous standards, and we should only have to define that term once. This is kind of the larger vision of how this transition is going to work. Now, the eventual plan is that all of the ISO family of standards are going to be on board with Annex SL by 2016 or 2017. There's a lot of standards out there, each one with its own technical committee, each one with its own various number of interested parties that want to weigh in and make sure that the update to the standard is as beneficial as it possibly can be. So it's going to be a very long-term process, as you might imagine. Let's take a look at the 10-section structure. Some of this is going to look very familiar. The first three sections, scope, normative references, and terms and definitions. This is very, very similar to the sections 1, 2, and 3 that already appear in ISO 9001-2008. And just like those three sections, these three are non-auditable. They are there to provide certain necessary explanations. Obviously, terms and definitions is important, but none of this is specifically auditable or certifiable content. So we hit our first set of certifiable auditable content in Section 4, very much like we do right now in ISO 9001-2008. This one is called Context of the Organization, and it covers some very high-level ideas: the scope of the system, who are the interested parties, establishing the quality management system, defining your processes. It continues with leadership in Section 5. There's a lot of things in here that should look very familiar from management responsibility, things like the policy, responsibility and authority, the commitment of management. In Section 6, we hit the Planning, this is where the risk management requirement that you've heard of, where that is found. We're definitely going to be covering that in some depth today. Quality objectives are found here. Again, a lot of this is familiar. In Section 7, we have what's called support. Resources, competency, this is where the training requirements are going to be found, communication, and then documented information. We're going to be covering that term shortly. You can think of sections 4, 5, 6, and 7 as foundation sections, very, very much in the spirit that sections 4, 5, and 6 from ISO 9001-2008 are foundation. In section 8 here we have operation. This is going to be your day-to-day activities, the core of your quality system. All of the familiar things, selling your product, purchasing, control of production, control of suppliers, non-conforming products, all of these things are found here in Section 8. The heart of the standard really is in Section 8. And then the standard wraps up with Sections 9 and 10, very, very much in the spirit of ISO 9001-2008, Section 8. A lot of those things are here: internal audit, management review, corrective action, and so forth. A lot of familiar content spread out now over 7 sections as opposed to 5. Let's take an in-depth look at the key changes. I want to give you some assurance here that this is not going to be as bad as perhaps you have been led to believe. First of all, the 9001 standard has brought in some content that was formerly found in ISO 9000 and 9004. The terms and definitions has been greatly expanded in 9001. A lot of these terms and definitions were formerly in the ISO 9000 document. In addition, the quality management principles, these were formerly found in ISO 9004. There are 7 of them now. These have been written into the 9001 standard as well. And what they've done with these is they've provided a sanctioned rationale to assist in understanding the intent behind the principle. Now what this has done is it's greatly increased the size of the standard itself. The DIS as written is over 50 pages long. Now bear in mind though that only 17 of those pages represent auditable or certifiable content. Now as to ISO 9000 and ISO 9004, plan on those both being updated in the near future. We don't know a whole lot about what the content for those 2 standards is going to be, how they're going to look in comparison to their past iterations. Both of these are going to continue to be non-certifiable standards. I can definitely confirm that much. But as to their planned content, we simply do not know. Now let's talk about risk management. I know that this is probably the most talked about requirement in the new standard. There's been a lot of chatter about this. I want to kind of lay this out for you and hopefully allay some of your fears and concerns. The term risk is used 18 times in the draft standard. It's spread out in a lot of places. And the concept here is that risk management is being viewed as a system-wide strategy. For those of you that have been certified long enough to remember when we transitioned from ISO 1994 to ISO 2000, the big new requirement at that time was continual improvement. And the idea back then was that continual improvement as a concept, as a philosophy, would permeate the entire quality system. It would be something that impacted all of your core and support processes. Well, management of risk is being viewed in the same light on this particular update. And they've gone to great lengths to say, we do not expect you to have a formal or documented risk management process. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. You don't have to come up with something burdensome. You need to show that you have considered the risks associated with certain decisions and that you've planned accordingly. Let's take a look at the requirement as it's been written in the current DIS standard. It says in 611, when you're planning for your system, the organization needs to consider the issues that are referred to in section 4.1, which is context, and the requirements referred to in 4.2, and determine then the risks and opportunities that need to be addressed first to give assurance that the system can achieve its intended results, can prevent or reduce undesired effects, and can achieve continual improvement. So think of this in terms of, when I'm setting out to plan out my processes, what are the potential risks that I'm going to encounter? Is my system equal to the task of those risks? In 6.1.2 it continues. It says, okay, you need to plan actions to address those risks and opportunities and how to integrate and implement those actions into your system and then evaluate the effectiveness of those actions. Actions then taken to address risks and opportunities need to be proportionate to the impact on the conformity of products and services. Now, if you kind of read between the lines here, you're going to see a very, very familiar requirement from ISO 9001-2008, and that is preventive action. Risk management, the way it has been written, it borrows heavily from the concept of preventive action. And this goes to another key point that I'd like to make. I know there's been quite a bit of talk that preventive action is eliminated from the new standard. Preventive action isn't going anywhere. It has been, if anything, the ideas behind preventive action have been expanded in this new standard. The whole idea of risk aversion. Now, the other requirement that should look very familiar to you is 7.1 from ISO 9001-2008, where we talk about planning for product realization. Risk management really is a combination of these concepts. Preventive action. What are the potential issues that we're going to encounter? What are the things that we need to be ready for? And then planning. Making sure that we have effective processes, that we've allocated resources, that we have effective process control measures in place, and so forth. This is something that an organization should already be doing. It's a best management practice. That's how this is being viewed. Some other changes I'd like to talk about, some key changes in terminology. Beginning with the elimination of the terms procedures, records, and documents. Those have all been eliminated in favor of the phrase documented information. The reason they're doing this, the standard is, again, trying to be more inclusive in accepting approaches to these requirements. A lot of companies have adopted computer systems. Computer systems have become a very important part of how a company does business, and that doesn't necessarily constitute a printed record or a tangible document that you have in your hand, but it is documented information. So the standard has inputted this terminology change in the interest of being more inclusive and, again, expanding the reach that ISO has and making it more palatable. All references to the term product are now going to read products and services. Again, the big idea here is that we want to have multiple types of businesses. We want those folks to view ISO 9001 as something that they could benefit from. Now, this is more or less already the case. If you read Clause 3 from ISO 9001-2008, it states wherever the term product appears, it can also mean service. So that's been now brought out into the body of the standard in a more formal capacity. The term management responsibility has become leadership. This pushes a little bit further the idea that management has to lead by example and by involvement rather than simply directing that activities are performed. Continual improvement has evolved into a larger section now simply called improvement. And the idea here is that continual improvement, those ongoing projects, are not really the only aspect of improvement that needs to be strived for in a quality system. You can have breakthroughs, you can have reactive changes, you can have reorganizations. Those can all constitute improvement within your quality system. So the standard wants to kind of expand your vision on what constitutes improvement. Suppliers are now referred to as external providers. Again, terminology that's intended to better accommodate service organizations. They've eliminated quite a bit of required content. ISO 9001:2015 is not going to require a quality manual. It's not going to require procedures or work instructions. Now, the idea here is that an organization should feel free to manage its processes in the manner that it works best for that organization. So theoretically, you could achieve certification without those documents. Now, that doesn't mean that the auditors are not going to come into your facility and evaluate you for consistency. That's still going to be a very important part of how the audits are going to be conducted. We're still going to assess you against the requirements of the ISO 9001 standard. If you can achieve consistency, if you can achieve effectiveness without the benefit of a quality manual or procedures or work instructions, then we as auditors have to respect that. We as auditors have to evaluate you against what you've established as the means of controlling your system. So those documents are no longer going to be specifically required outright by the standard. The term management representative has been eliminated. And the idea here is that not so much that the responsibility has been eliminated, but rather that that party's key functions need to fall to top management itself. Top management needs to make sure that management review meetings are carried out, that the system is reported on, that the needs of the customer are promoted throughout the organization. In practice, this is really how a lot of companies are already handling the management of their system. And this doesn't mean that we can't have a key person, a key contact. What this means in practice is that as auditors, we're going to want to see that top management is involved in the managing of the quality system. It's not going to mean that you can't have a key contact. Permissible exclusions have been eliminated, and the way that this is being viewed, you're going to be able to designate items under a non-applicable designation as opposed to calling them out as permissible exclusions. Now, what that means in practice, not a whole lot different from what we're doing right now. If a company claims an exclusion under ISO 9001:2008, the validity of that exclusion is looked at every audit. If a company claims a non-applicable under ISO 9001:2015, we are going to verify the validity of that non-applicable designation. So in practice, it will not be all that different. Let's take a look section by section at the key new questions that have been posed by the 2015 standard. Beginning with sections 1 through 3, which as I mentioned are not specifically auditable. This is as before. In section 4, context of the organization, we've identified two key new questions that are asked by the rewrite. What purpose does this organization serve, and who does it exist for? Who are the stakeholders in this organization and that are going to be impacted by this quality system? In section 5, the leadership, this is a strong language that is related to top management's involvement. There's a couple of key new questions that have been asked. Has management made itself accountable for the effectiveness of the system or the lack of effectiveness of the system? Has management made sure that the objectives and the policy are consistent with the strategic direction of the company? Has the management system been integrated into the business processes? So if as an organization you have your quality system in one sphere and your strategic system somewhere else, if those things are operating at cross purposes, that could potentially be an issue. Those two systems need to be as much on the same path as possible and with the same shared vision. And so the rewrite that's represented here by Section 5 is really pushing that particular idea, the whole idea that an organization's strategic vision should be the same as the quality system vision. They should work to the same purpose, to the same goals. In Section 6, we have, as I mentioned, the risk management requirement. Planning is now being viewed in a whole new light. And obviously the questions are, have the risks been considered? Have the actions been taken for those risks? And then with quality objectives, and again, this is not different from how it was viewed previously, but it's now called out within the standard. Who's responsible for these objectives? What are the target dates? What are you looking to accomplish by virtue of these objectives? In Section 7, we have support. This is a very much pieces from Section 6 of ISO 2008, bits and pieces of 4 and 5. One new area of content here is represented by 7.1.6, where the question is asked, has the organization considered the changing needs and trends of its competency base and determined what's going to be needed for the future? So again, this is very much an aspect of risk management. Have we looked at our current pool of talent? Do we have what we need for 6 months from now, for a year from now? Beyond that idea, there's no real significant new content that hasn't been present in some form already in ISO 2008. And that's also very much the case for Section 8. It's very, very similar to ISO 9001-2008 Section 7. There is no significant new content here that hasn't been present in some form already. That's also true for Section 9. Although in Section 9 we have now a new place for management review, it's been tied in with measurement, analysis, and improvement. And then finally Section 10, and again, no significant new content in Section 10 that wasn't already present in some form in ISO 9001-2008. So hopefully what you can take away from this is that the changes to the ISO 9001 standard are minimal. They're manageable. Even risk management is not such a new idea if you consider that preventive action has been a part of the 9001 standard since it was first published. Some of these ideas are things that you've hopefully been doing all along and are now going to be subject to audit, but not a whole lot of new content. So let's address a very key question for a lot of you. Do we have to overhaul our system? Our analysis of the draft standard has concluded you will absolutely not necessarily have to overhaul your system. The TC 176 committee, one of their goals was making sure that this new standard was going to be palatable to more industries, to expand the use of the ISO 9001 standard. If you tell over 1 million worldwide certified companies that they have to overhaul their current system, that's not very inclusive. That doesn't get us to our goal of improving the utilization of the 9001 standard. So what does that mean? If you have a quality manual that fits your business, keep it. If your procedures are effective, if they are value added for you, absolutely keep those procedures. If your quality policy, your quality objectives, your process controls, the form that you use to record training for your people, if all of those things are well known, if all of them are well implemented and adding value to your system, absolutely keep all of it. You should not have to change any of those things in a transition to the ISO 9001-2015 standard. What we're going to recommend going forward, again, definitely wait until the 9001:2015 standard is actually published. Yes, you can go out and purchase the DIS now. You can purchase the FDIS when that is published in July. But in terms of the most benefit for your organization, wait until you can get your hands on the actual 9001:2015 standard. Take a look at that new standard and identify the gaps that exist within your system. It's entirely conceivable that there won't be any gaps. Determine the strategies for the gaps that do exist. Make sure that your existing documentation works for you first and foremost. Now, if this means that you have to renumber your documentation, if this means that you have to restructure it so that you can have it better aligned with the standard, then do so. Now, within the documentation, it's entirely possible that you will have references to the 9001:2008 standard. For example, it might say, this procedure has been written to fulfill the requirements of Section 4.2.3 of ISO 9001:2008. That would represent a document control procedure, obviously. Those types of references will have to be updated. But procedure titles, the form number that you've assigned to procedures, if you want to leave those things the way that they are, you certainly can feel free to do so. Obviously, your first couple of audits under the new standard are going to be extremely valuable to you. Your auditors are going to provide expert analyses of your system against the revised criteria. They are going to target those things where you may have come up short. You can consider your auditor to be a valuable resource in this transition process. Let's answer a key question. Should we get certified now or wait? I suspect there are some of you on our webinar today that are in the stages of implementing a new quality management system, and you may not already be certified. And you've put time into implementing ISO 9001:2008, and you're wondering, is there still value in certifying to ISO 9001:2008? Should I wait and certify to ISO 2015? Now, obviously, we can't make the final decision for you. It has to. You have to bear in mind that ISO 9001:2008 has at least 3.5 years of usability left in it. If it's published on time in September of this year, ISO 2008 will be a usable standard until September of 2018. That's 3.5 years. I also want you to bear in mind that the very first audits later this year to ISO 2015 are going to be difficult, both for auditor and auditee. We're going to have to get used to the new standard as well. Now, obviously, with the passage of time, the auditors will get more comfortable in auditing 2015. That will go towards ensuring a smooth transition, and that's what we're striving for. So let's talk about what's next and where we go from here. PJR is going to continue to provide you with timely information during this transition process. Now, as I've mentioned, it's going to be possible that the new standard is going to bear some further revision to make sure that all of the interested parties are as satisfied as they possibly can be. As we learn more, we will definitely share what we learn with our clients and make sure that you are as informed as possible on what's coming and how ISO 2015 is going to affect you. I do want to thank all of you for your time. I do hope this presentation has been helpful. At this time, I'm going to open up the question pane, and we'll see if we have any questions. Okay, we have a question from Stephen Bush, and Stephen asks, what is the relationship of the risk management requirements found in the 9001 standard and the current ISO 14971, which of course is mentioned by name in ISO 13485? That's a great question, Stephen. I'll also throw out that there are additional standards that relate to risk management. I believe ISO 30001, I believe, is called risk management. Stephen, I would say that if an organization were to use ISO 14971 as guidance in establishing a risk management program, that would benefit them, but it's not going to be required. It's not going to be mandatory. Again, I'll re-emphasize, the organizations are being encouraged to develop a system for risk management that works for them. And it does not have to be formal in any way. I would say that this could be integrated into management review, for example. This can be integrated into your internal audit process. It should, if you have an effective preventive action program in place, you can definitely lean on that as part of your fulfillment of the requirement. Think about some of the things that companies do to plan out their processes, to plan out their system. Things like production meetings, production schedules, making sure that resources are available, making sure that you review a proposal from a customer before you endeavor to provide goods or services. All of these things are going to help you as an organization to meet this risk management requirement. You just need to be prepared as an organization to explain to the auditors and to yourselves, here is what we do to identify risks, here is what we do to manage those risks. So Stephen, I do hope I've answered your question. Are there any other questions? We're getting some questions on availability of the presentation. We will definitely be making these available to you. Our technical staff will address those questions. Any other questions on the content of the presentation? Robert Wells asks, does the definition of external providers differ significantly from suppliers in the 2008 standard? Robert, I don't believe that those two terms are terribly different in terms of how they've been defined. I don't have the verbatim definitions committed to memory, but in my past readings I have not identified a significant difference in the definitions for those two terms. Okay, are there any further questions I can answer today? I'll mention, as we're waiting on any additional questions that might be coming, this presentation is going to be available on our website under past webinars. You can definitely revisit this. The slides will also be available. Are there any further questions? Okay, well, I want to thank all of you again for your time. I do hope this presentation has been beneficial. I'll wish all of you a very good day. Thank you.